Hey, friends, welcome back to the podcast. My name is Adam. Thank you so much for joining us again today. And I'm always super thankful for anybody that takes the time to listen to this. This is um, definitely this type of podcasting and trying to grow a business or, an account or whatever. I'll be honest with you, it's a slow grind. And I'm always thankful for the text messages, the emails I get, the messages in my Instagram or Facebook or X feeds that are the messages I get that are encouraging. They're saying, "Hey, I really appreciate your podcast. I appreciate your content." We do our best to work really hard to be a blessing to anybody who is tuning into the content, but specifically to those people that are in the ministry space, in the Christian ministry space, where you are actively sacrificing, whether it's finances, time, energy, to help other people know Jesus, to help other people come to the saving knowledge of Jesus and accepting his gospel, his truth. And changing their lives. And that's not always an easy task. And I'm thankful for anybody who is willing to do that. I've been in the ministry a long time. I started in the ministry when I was about 17 years old. And I've worked in some form of church, nonprofit, missions, in some form for the last 30 plus years. So I'm always very thankful for people who are willing to put their own interest in some sense to the back in order to help others or dedicate their lives to the Great Commission. So thank you for listening. Thank you for all the comments. If this has been a blessing to you, please, I would love to hear from you. Or if you have questions or concerns, check us out on YouTube for certain, on my YouTube channel. Or on your Spotify or Apple, whatever. But the YouTube, we're going to try to pour a little bit more information into there, especially in the descriptions. And we're going to do our best to add value to you. Hey, just make sure that you are not just thinking about your diet and your physical health, but also your spiritual health. Make sure you're reading. Make sure you're, practicing your spiritual disciplines in a sense and leading your family by example if you have family. So, but I do want to drop a note for those of you who are looking for any type of supplementation help. I do have an affiliate code with Upgraded Formulas. So they have some great products like a natural testosterone support. We have magnesium, which magnesium has recently been in the news saying, hey, the more magnesium you have in your system at any given time or over time, the better your brain health, the better chances of not having dementia, blah, 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 blah. So dementia runs in my family. So that's something we're guarding against regularly. So I take magnesium regularly. I take a testosterone support regularly. I also take creatine. But Upgraded Formulas, you can use code ADAM10 and you'll get 10% off of any order you submit. And that will go to supporting what we're trying to do here. Because, like I said, it's a slow grind and any support helps. So check those guys out. Would love to get some feedback from you on that. But today I want to talk about a topic that is very common right now amongst people that I either speak with or people who come to me with questions. I don't always just coach people. I also do consultations with people. So not everybody is a client, like an ongoing client. Many times people just reach out and they say, I have questions and I would like to have a trusted source give me their opinion on these things, okay? Especially with the rise of everything with COVID and the trust the science, and apparently you can't question science, but that having science, the whole point of science is that it's never settled, that it's always questioning. So there's been a real downgrade in the trust of doctors, pharmaceutical companies, uh, government agencies that are supposed to be helping our health when apparently they're all in bed together, and they're all paying one another off either in actual funds or in recommendations. So there's a lot of mistrust that has happened inside the medical system. You know, it's gotten to the place where it looks like the recommendations coming from the government will have you eating the standard American diet. Those recommendations will lead you into your standard medical practice. And that medical practice will recommend the standard pharmaceutical care. And it's a big circle that it seems to profit off of your not being healthy, because patients are returned customers. And I hate to be a cynic about it, but it really is starting to look that way, that there is this concerted effort to keep people dumb, to keep people fat and sick and uninformed. And anybody who questions, anybody who thinks freely, anybody who just even has an off-the-wall concern is somewhat demonized. And people start throwing randomized controlled trials at you like that's supposed to mean something. But it doesn't. All it does is it continues to confirm people's suspicions that something's going on. Okay? And today's topic is no different. Okay? We're talking about red meat and heart disease. Okay? I regularly, people will come to me for consultations. And if you want to do a consultation, we can put a link for a call in the show notes. And, you know, it does have a paywall, because as much as I would love to give away my time, I do have a family. So we do have to make something off of it. But I get regular people with consultations just saying, hey, I got my blood work done. I do need to lose some weight, but my doctor is saying my cholesterol is too high, and they're telling me to avoid eggs, red meat, butter, and all these other things. And they want to give me a statin. Okay. So I hear this at least once or twice a week. Okay. And the issue with it is that there's a twofold issue. Doctors who are still parroting that recommendation are not up to date on current research. Now, I realize not every doctor has time for that. That's okay. But you, as a doctor, and I'm not one, but as a professional in any area, it seems like let me just say, how do I put it? It seems like an obvious need to try to stay up to date on current information, right? Especially when people's lives are on the line. So there's a couple things. Many doctors do not stay up to date on current research. Many doctors are incentivized to prescribe certain medications like statins, which are some of the most prescribed. Statins would be Lipitor, Crestor, blah, 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 blah. These things that artificially lower cholesterol in the body. Many doctors are incentivized to prescribe these things, okay, which immediately takes trust out of the system. Because if I know you're making money off of this thing that you're recommending, and it just puts money in your pocket and it doesn't do anything negative to you, but does come with side effects for me, and you don't ask me about lifestyle stuff, you just give me a drug, then there's something amiss there. So the system is set up for doctors by insurance companies to spend as little time as possible with the patient and just prescribe. Okay, so that's how insurance pushes doctors. Okay, on top of that, the pharmaceutical companies are incentivizing the doctors to prescribe specific medications. And they're even messing with the ranges, the healthy ranges for what would require a prescription or not. For many years, 300 a total cholesterol of 300 was considered normal, right? And then all of a sudden they come out with Lipitor and other statins, and now all of a sudden the upper range of normal is 200. Well, if everybody is roughly in the 200 to 300 range, then immediately you have a huge customer base. Okay, so there's a lot of built-in issue. Okay, but the narrative that red meat, saturated fat causes heart disease is still going around. I still see people, they'll post, if I post a picture of a big steak and people are like, look at all that fat. And I'm like, you don't see the protein, you don't see the zinc, the selenium, the phosphorus, the B vitamins, the folate. You don't see any of that. You just see fat because it's been pushed into our minds. And we've been told that, red meat is killing the planet, it's killing us, and it's making us all have heart disease. Okay. There's a huge narrative with this that needs to be addressed. And one of the things I want to address today is that there's a new study that came out that says, and it's done very well, the study. Let me read it. The study was, it's technically a meta-analysis, which is a study of studies, and it's done with the Mendelian randomization, which is another further level of taking into account genetic predispositions and other things. So, and then the information is run through certain databases to confirm or blah, 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 right? So this is probably one of the highest standards of looking at information and deriving a basic direction, right? So studies never necessarily prove a thing or disprove a thing. What they do is they add information to a data set that says we're either like, this is possibly positive or this is possibly negative. Okay, when people say, I have a study that proves this, no study proves anything. That study has a data point that is added to a specific direction. Okay, so this new meta-analysis is called the red meat and processed meat intake and risk of cardiovascular disease, a 2-sample Mendelian randomization study. Okay, this new study came out, and right out of the gate, eating red meat was not associated with heart disease or stroke based off of this new study. Okay, so meaning eating red meat, eating burgers and other lamb and all this other stuff was not going to associated with having heart disease or stroke. Okay, so it put it into the category of this is probably okay to eat. All right, or it took it out of the category of this is probably something you should avoid. Okay, so now before we dive into it, we need to realize, like, I'm very animal-based biased. I believe animals, based off the things that I've seen, proteins, fats, the makeups of how we digest them, the makeup of human biology, how well we process certain things. I believe that animal sources are the most nutritious, most digestible, most bioavailable way to get nutrients into the human body. Okay, it doesn't mean plants are bad. It doesn't mean fruits are going to kill everybody. It doesn't mean carbs are killing everybody. It means none of that. It just means that I believe humans should eat animal products. And if that goes against your sensibilities, if that goes against some of your moral sensibilities, I'm sorry about that. But the science doesn't care about your feelings. So I'm sorry about that. So now I have studied this for a long time. I'm not a lipidologist. I'm not a doctor, but I am well read and I think for myself. So take that for what it's worth, okay? So before we get started, just know that I don't have a bias against vegan diets. In particular, I don't have a bias against vegetarian diets or pescatarian diets in particular. What I do have a bias against is I have a bias against people making unfounded claims and using religious language and moral superiority to prove a point, and expecting people with a brain who understand science, biology, and know how to read studies to some extent, which that's a whole skill in and of itself. Reading studies is something that takes years to master, and I'll be honest with you, I'm only trying to get better at it. But I don't like it when people use false claims and emotional manipulation to try to claim something scientific. It doesn't fly with me. Okay, so like we've had the blue zones come around. The blue zones have been debunked because they, of course, cherry picked. They left Hong Kong out of the blue zone. Hong Kong has one of the highest meat consumptions in the world, and also one of the longest lived peoples in the world. Okay, they stuck with Okinawa, they stuck with Sardinia, they stuck with Loma Linda, all places that very much specifically fit a vegetarian Seventh-day Adventist narrative. Okay, so let's look at this. One of the things that we need to realize is that people who we've been told for many years that saturated fat causes high cholesterol causes heart disease. Now, we do know that lifetime exposure, how much you're exposed to high LDL, which I don't know that it is parsed on whether it's, low, like small LDL or puffy LDL, because there are subfactions of that. I don't know if this information is parsed in that way, but we do know that based on the information that when you are exposed over your lifetime to high LDL levels, the chances of heart attack go up, like they tick together. Okay. Now, we don't know if that's because people are eating garbage. We don't know if that's because people are obese. There's no way to really parse that out. So some people say it's an independent risk factor, which that could be the case. But in this case, what we're talking about is red meat is not associated with that heart attack. Okay. So let's talk real quick. The million-dollar question would be, where is the disconnect between what we've been taught and what has been studied in, all the books that we've read about and studies we've read? There's a big disconnect. It takes years to figure out that the paradigm of what's causing heart disease is shifting. And we've had it wrong for a long time, it seems. So this is a quote from the study, okay? This quote says, although the impact of red and processed meat intake on cardiovascular outcomes has been studied, inherent limitations hinder definitive causal conclusions, meaning there are certain limitations that are just keeping us from creating an actual conclusion here. Causal conclusion. Traditional epidemiological studies designs cannot fully account for confounding factors and reverse causation. The study we're talking about is a Mendelian randomization study. The MR is a method that applies the use of genetic variation to address casual questions or causal questions about how modifiable exposures influence different outcomes. In this study, the Genome-Wide Association studies, GWAS, of red meat, pork, beef, and lamb, and processed meat sourced from the United Kingdom's Biobank, that information was cross-referenced with public databases from a coronary artery disease, a megastroke, database, Nielsen et al., which is about arterial fibrillation, Hermes, which is a heart failure database, FinGen, which is cardiovascular outcomes database. This is a better and more complete way to do epidemiological studies, like the way we have previously done them, where epidemiological studies are where they just ask people, like, what'd you eat over the last year? And like nobody can really remember what they ate, and people are like, yeah, I had some pasta with, some bolognese sauce, and I had hamburgers here and there, and I had some pizza, and they're like, oh, well, red meat's causing the problems. But you're like, nobody's taking into account that pizza is not red meat. Pizza is basically dough. So there's a lot of confounding factors, okay? Like lasagna would not be considered a red meat dish. It would be considered a pasta dish, but it goes in the list of things that are considered causal. So this Mendelian randomization definitely helps clear up some of those confounding factors, okay? But since the study is confirming that there seems to be no relationship, why then have we been told for decades that red meat causes heart disease? So for that, we have to go back just a little bit, and I'm going to do my best. I'm reading here, so just bear with me, okay? We have to realize that for millennia, humans didn't have heart disease that we know of. This is a modern disease. In fact, in the early 1900s, a doctor could go their entire career and never see a heart attack. Nowadays, that would be impossible. I mean, people are dying, 800,000 people a year are dying from heart attacks or cardiovascular disease in the United States. 800,000. Put that in perspective. Okay? It wasn't until about the 1930s that heart attacks started to become an issue. They increased more in the 1940s and in the 1950s. And then in 1955, Dwight D. Eisenhower had a heart attack, which the president had a heart attack. So it put heart attacks right on the front page. And it's something that's now killing everybody, and we need to deal with this thing, okay? So Eisenhower was in the hospital for 10 days. Now all the attention is put on these heart disease. That's all this thing that's killing people in their 40s, 50s, and 60s all of the sudden. So a scientist named Ansel Keys hypothesized that it was due to saturated fat. Saturated fat was, in his opinion, causing the rise of cholesterol and clogging arteries, okay? And this is what people still say. Like if they see me eating some butter, they're like, that's gonna clog your arteries. So they see how many eggs I eat, and they're like, your arteries must look terrible. Unfortunately for them, my arteries are as clear as a new hose pipe. You know what I mean? So this started the scientific community. Ansel Keys' hypothesis started the scientific community down this saturated fat road, okay? Which unfortunately was completely the wrong direction, it seems. Also, it's confounded with the fact that Ansel Keys took a $50,000 bribe from the sugar industry to point at saturated fat. Side note, okay? That must be completely unrelated, just so you know. Okay? So we have to realize that cholesterol is not the ultimate cause of heart disease. Cholesterol is produced by the human body. It is used for an untold number of processes in the body. 70 to 80% of the cholesterol in your body is produced in the body, okay? So how can something the body is producing that's not an autoimmune issue is now causing the problem, okay? So we need to think logically here, okay? So trying to lower cholesterol in the body is like trying to contain smoke, right? So if we have smoke, I see smoke out there. We should go over there and deal with that smoke. No, you don't deal with smoke. You deal with the fire that's causing the smoke, okay? So we need to address the root cause. The cholesterol and the cholesterol issues take care of themselves, okay? So if cholesterol is rising and we're having a disproportionate amount of HDL to triglycerides and LDL, and we're having a disproportionate amount of the types of LDL, which we'll get into in a second, then something's causing that dysfunction. And it's not just the body having a problem. It's not the cholesterol is bad because the body makes it. Okay, so something is causing this dysfunction, all right? So that is the thing we need to figure out, okay? The focus on saturated fat and lowering cholesterol at all costs has led to decades of unnecessary suffering and early deaths, like tragic amounts of suffering, okay? But here is exactly how this works, okay? When the body has inflammation, the new thinking is that inflammation is causing these heart attacks, and there's a mechanism for it. Okay, when you have I think it's I always get the word wrong. Endothelial, basically the inside of your arteries, the way the cells are made up. Okay, so what happens is this is what happens. The inner linings of the heart and arteries get damaged from inflammation, and the body adapts to repairing it, okay? The body is trying to heal you, okay? It's like if you were, let's say, standing in a small room, okay? And somebody punches a hole through the wall, okay? Well, you're gonna fix that hole, and what you're gonna do is you're gonna spackle it, you're gonna put some new drywall there if the hole's big enough. You're going to spackle it, you're going to texture it. But that little section of the wall is now slightly jutted out from the rest of the wall because of the patching situation, okay? It's like scar tissue. So if you do this once, you barely see it. And if you would repair the hole, patch it, texture it, paint it, you probably would barely notice it. But that wall is slightly thicker right there. Okay, not a big deal. But imagine doing the same process every day or multiple times a day for 20 years. The walls of the room would become slowly closer, more enclosed, and then maybe it's not the same place that's getting a hole. Maybe it's different parts of the wall getting holes. Okay, so now we're patching from all sides, okay? Eventually, you would be standing in a very tiny room with all the walls closing in on you if you did this every day, multiple times a day for 20 years, okay? That's exactly what's happening to your artery walls, okay? Because the inflammation damages the artery walls, right? Where like you have these like endothelial, I think it's kind of, the way somebody has explained it, I've heard, is that it's kind of like the cells are laid over each other, and when they get inflamed, they pop up, and then they create, they create like a breach. So what the body does is it sends LDL cholesterol over to patch that, and it patches it, and it gets a little bit of calcium to patch it, right? So it causes a little bit of a rise. But if you continue to eat the same way and live the same way for the next 30 years, and you're continually causing problems inside of your artery cell in your arteries, well, the continual need to patch is going to be the problem, okay? So eventually, this will clog your arteries and cause a heart attack. Did you know that roughly 37% of the time, the first sign of heart attack is death? Okay, so this is an issue. Okay, that's what was happening in the 1940s and 50s. People were literally just dropping dead, and nobody knew what was going on. So what was causing the sudden rise of inflammation? It was threefold. There was a lot more smoking in that time, of course. There was an increase in the consumption of refined sugars and also early stages of consuming seed oils, okay? In fact, saturated fat increases So it wasn't technically the saturated fat that was doing this, okay? Because people had been eating it, and beef consumption, egg consumption was technically starting to lower, as this narrative of cholesterol is the problem, right? So beef and egg consumption is technically about 30% lower than it was previously, about 50 years ago. But yet heart attacks are up exponentially. But nobody's looking at the fact that the FDA, the land that the FDA building sit on was donated by Coca-Cola. That's why the FDA never comes out and says anything about drinking soft drinks. It never says anything about limiting sugar. It never talks about those things because there is a financial incentive to not talk about it, okay? But the beef and cattle industry didn't help them. So there's an issue, okay? So it's not saturated fat that's caused an issue. Actually, when you have a lack of inflammation in the body and you eat lots of saturated fat, it actually is quite protective and it works in your favor because it increases your HDL, which is good cholesterol for lack of a better term, and lowers small density LDL particles, which LDL can be broken into different subfractions. The really small density ones, the small dense ones, are the ones you don't want. Those are the ones that get stuck and start causing clogs, okay? But big puffy ones in LDL, they have other ones. These are totally safe. They don't get stuck. They don't help. They don't get rammed into the clogs and stuff, okay? Small density LDL particles are a specific type of LDL associated with heart disease. Before we go further, we need to understand the total cholesterol is calculated. Total cholesterol is calculated by your HDL plus your LDL numbers plus 20% of your triglycerides. That gives you your total cholesterol, okay? If your total cholesterol is over 200, they will typically recommend you begin statins or cholesterol medication to lower your cholesterol. In fact, they're one of the most prescribed drugs in America. All LDL particles are not created equal. LDL has what is called subfractions, and this is newer science that's come out about 10 years or so ago. The three main types of LDL subfractions are big puffy LDL, not associated with heart disease, medium-sized LDL, not associated with heart disease, small dense LDL particles, which are associated with heart disease, okay? So when a person starts eating saturated fats and other healthy fats, the following happens, okay? LDL increases, or HDL increases, good cholesterol increases. The big puffy LDL increases, which is fine. The medium-sized one increases as well. And technically the small ones decrease. Okay, so that the small dense LDL, the ones associated with heart disease, actually decrease as we eat more saturated fat in the diet, which is exactly what we want. When patients go to a doctor that understands this is exactly what they see. When they lower sugar intake, lower total seed oil intake, people that don't smoke, and lower their alcohol intake, and they eat more real animal products, you find that this is exactly what happens with people, okay? They drop weight, their total LDL goes up. Yeah, of course, it goes up because you're eating more saturated fat. But the types of LDL matter, okay? The small ones that are caused the problems that get clogged easier, those actually go down for the most part, okay? So we're actually lowering our risk, okay? It's not a surprise to say this because it's no surprise that people say, like if you go to a doctor will say, yeah, hey man, you lost a bunch of weight, you look great, but your cholesterol is still too high. We need to, you need to avoid these foods. Those are people that are still not educated on what's new, okay? The best thing you can do is try to implement protocols that you will hear in this content, which is like, hey, we want to eat We want to limit sugars. We want to limit ultra processed foods. We want to limit refined sugar, especially in drinks and in alcohol, like wine, beer, mixed drinks, cookies, sweets, pies, pastries. We want to lower all that. We want to lower the total grain intake, like grains, which would be pasta, rice, breads, sorghum, all these other grains, okay? We want to lower all that because they are pro-inflammatory. And we want to increase the amount of good animal products we're eating, steaks, fish, dairy if you can handle it, oysters, tuna, eggs, pork in the form of bacon if you can get it, which is good. Sausages, probably not the best, but they're not horrible. And then lamb, other red meats, okay? Eating more meats like that and increasing your total fiber intake, like just good vegetable matter. You don't need to go crazy and eat a ton of fiber, but just increasing that with whole fruits, whole vegetables, those types of things. When people do this, you will see that they lose weight, number one. Number two, LDL, total cholesterol, does go up, okay? But not all cholesterol is created the same. And then people get into healthier ranges, ratio-wise, between their HDL and their triglycerides, okay? Which having those deranged, having high LDL and your triglycerides, the ratios being off, is usually a sign that you are pre-diabetic, insulin resistant, and you have tons of inflammation in your body, okay? Every time, like I said, every time you see somebody do this, their HDL gets better, their weight gets better, their LDL does go up, but their small density LDL, the ones associated with heart disease, go down, okay? We can no longer simply say that total cholesterol alone can make a recommendation for medications, okay? You have to realize cholesterol is needed for proper brain and cellular function. It's a precursor for every sex hormone in your body, cholesterol, and it does a lot more, okay? It's a part of every cell in your body, okay? So trying to get rid of it is like saying, hey, I'd like to get rid of the building blocks of this house. This house is made of certain substances that I'm allergic to, apparently. So let me just try to remove those substances, and your house falls down. I wonder what happened, okay? Inflammation is the problem. Refined sugar, processed grains, seed oils, which are like vegetable oils that up until 100 years ago were only used to lubricate machinery. If you tried to make, let's say, seed oils in your house, well, then you would need a hazmat suit because hexane gas is part of the way they extract seed oils from canola, cottonseed oil, rapeseed, all these others, okay? So when you take in seed oils, you are taking in industrial products. You're taking in waste products from things that we are not supposed to be eating in such huge quantities. And now most Americans are getting like about 700 calories per day from seed oils alone, okay? If you're a small woman, that's like half your calories for the day. If you're a grown man, that's like a third or a fourth, okay? Significant, causes a lot of problems, all right? So seed oils are an issue. The other thing you can do is make sure that you're eating plenty of soluble fiber, which is in the form of whole vegetables, whole real vegetables, whole fruit, not fruit juice. Eating plenty of animal fats, lard, tallow, fish oil, grass-fed butter, ghee, coconut oil, olive oil, avocado oil, and avocados. Some nuts and seeds like macadamia nuts and other tree nuts in small quantities, honestly. All these things were consumed by humans for a long time before we ever had heart disease, okay? Also consider taking supplements that are cause less inflammation in the body, like omega-3 fish oils. I like cod liver oil. Vitamin D has some anti-inflammatory effects, and curcumin or turmeric also has some. So your one action step that I would encourage you to take if this is an issue for you or you've gotten a report on this is to realize, like, the way cholesterol has been measured for the last few decades has not changed. The recommendations have not changed. Eat less of that, eat less of this stuff, take this medication, see you in 6 months. And people are dying more and more, not just because of population increase, but I mean, in what, like 6 years, more than 50% of America will be obese. 1 in 2 people will be obese. That doesn't just mean fat. That means morbidly fat. That means health risking fat. Okay? But yet somehow the recommendations don't change when more and more people are dying. So maybe there's an issue with how we've been doing this, okay? So we need to realize that the standard recommendation no longer works, okay? So just because your doctor says you have high LDL, you need to get another blood test. You need to make these changes. You need to make these changes. Cut out refined sugar and ultra-processed foods. That means all the foods that have commercials that come in boxes, they're in the middle of the store. That's trash. That's not food. That's stuff that just goes through your colon and causes problems on the way through. Okay, it's not food. Seed oils, cut those out. Most of the time, those are easy to cut out when you cut out the ultra-processed food. Refined sugar, so stop adding sugar to everything. If you drink coffee, drink caffeine pills. Take caffeine pills instead of drinking your 900-calorie Frappuccino from Starbucks that barely has any coffee in it. Okay? Stop getting the 800-calorie blueberry muffin, which is just seed oils, sugar, butter, and refined grains. Okay? So lower grains, lower seed oils, lower sugar, increase good animal products, increase whole vegetables, whole fruit, start exercising, and in 12 weeks, roughly 3 months, get another test done, get another blood test done. You can go to LabCorp, which is probably one of the largest ones in the United States, and you want to ask for another lipid panel, but you want to be able to see the LDL subfractions. I want to see the large LDL, I want to see the medium and the small, okay? And I want to see the ratios of my HDL to triglycerides, okay? And I want a C-reactive protein test, which is going to also tell you how much inflammation is in your body. So the last time I got my blood work done, my cholesterol was 300. And the doctor was like, whoa, 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 whoa. That's crazy. We need to do some things. We need to change some things. I had my C-reactive protein done. It was 0. So I had 0 inflammation. I had basically had an unmeasurable amount of, so little that it was not measurable, inflammation in my body. So the chances of having a heart attack were like none. Okay? So you have to get another test done. Make these changes. Realize that cholesterol has been the boogeyman for a long time, but there was just a guy who had a surgery done and it took all the cholesterol out of his body. He died. First of all, what an idiot. Secondly, the doctors are butchers who allow people to do that kind of stuff. We need to realize that foods that humans have been eating for a long time are foods we should be eating, not foods that come from manufacturing plants. Food manufacturers are not making food. They're making edible waste. Okay? I mean, they're even trying to say, hey, you can now make food out of plastic because you can digest it. It's not food. Just because you can eat it and poop it out doesn't make it food. I can feed you pennies. It's not going to be food. You're going to eat pennies and poop them out. But if I keep doing that to you long enough, you're going to get probably heavy metal poisoning. You know what I mean? Like, just because food goes through you doesn't mean it is food. So make these changes. If you're the type of person who's getting the report that your cholesterol is too high, you need to get your inflammation down. You need to get your good animal foods and proteins up. You need to get your vegetables up. You need to get your fruit in a moderate place. Stop drinking your calories. Stop making smoothies that are basically fruit, just blended. Stop drinking orange juice. Stop drinking sodas. Diet sodas will be much more preferable. And stop eating bread and refined sugar at every meal. Okay? You make these changes with an exercise program where you start getting 5 to 10,000 steps a day and lifting weights a couple times a week. In 12 weeks, your numbers will be in a much better place. Your inflammation will be lower, and your risk of having a heart attack will be exponentially lowered. Okay? So hopefully this has been helpful, but we need to realize that this boogeyman of cholesterol is not the problem. It's the lifestyle that precedes these numbers that is the problem. Okay? So you're not going to be able to hang your future on one number. What you're going to be able to hang your future on is the habits you have on a daily basis. Okay? Now remember, God wants you to thrive. God wants you to be around to do the things He's called you to do. So make the changes that are needed. Change before you have to, like my friend Rob Ketterling wrote a book about. Change before you have to change. Don't wait for the first sign of heart disease or heart attack, which is usually death for almost 40% of people. Okay? Don't wait for that. Start now. You owe it to your family, and you owe it to the one who created you to take care of the temple that He gave you. All right? So hopefully this has been helpful. Sorry, it was a little disjointed in my approach, but it is a big topic. And like I said, I'm not a lipidologist, but I've studied this a lot. And I've done a lot of experimentation on myself, and I've worked with a lot of people, and this information lines up with my experience. Okay? So hopefully this has been encouraging to you, and hopefully it will help you make better choices in the future and stop being afraid of certain foods, but be more vigilant against certain lifestyle factors. Okay?